Okay, so listen, what I thought would be very, very effective is let me just come up with some preliminary remarks about Israel and the Middle East, on top of what I said about the Middle East before. So let me just, again, it's my observation, not Tel Aviv University. I mean, I can say that Tel Aviv University, grosso modo, thinks the opposite of what I'm saying here. I mean, if I can say that. So this is my observation. I have to just make sure. What we did in the Dayan Center, and I am heading a group of researchers for almost 10 years in Israel, who are trying to take the knowledge which is accumulated and combine it with what I call the praxis. Okay? Just to try to make the expertise be kind of a lever by which to do things on the ground in a more well-organized and well-thought way. It's not that we have the solutions. Solutions is a very dangerous word in the Middle East, because, you know, you can solve out problems when you are familiar with the problems. In the Middle East, there are many who have solutions, but haven't got a clue about what the problems are. So we are going step by step, trying to understand. Remember, actually, people do not really understand what the Middle East is. I'm not saying that kind of a sarcastic note, really not. But you know, I've been there actually all the way. I am visiting many Arab states, because Israel has a kind of a wonderful, I won't say honeymoon, but the mutual functional alliances between Israel and Arab states came to be seen here in abundance because of the geopolitical shift. Okay, not because of real intimacy, not true friendship, I have to say. So let me just tell you, you know, actually how I see that. Of course, we can just open the floor up to just further elaboration on things. I'm pretty sure that you can contribute to my thinking, at least as I can do that for you. And I think that the many disciplines you are coming up with, and your experience and your way of thought could be, in my opinion, very instrumental in getting something which is more right to the point. Well, Israel, first of all, make sure that when it comes to the public, the Arab street and Islamic street, and when it comes to the Arab leadership, it's two different worlds. Okay? So, for example, Israel has peace treaty with Israel, with Egypt for 40 years. Wonderful. Any Egyptians here? Where is the Egyptian guy? My friend? Is the other? Okay. So I would say the same thing actually at 4 o'clock or 4:30 when he is here. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Egyptian street, and I've been living in Egypt for more than a year, really sadly, you know, Israel is being taken as a pariah. I haven't seen, I think, more anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli society which can be compared to what I have seen in Egypt. Okay? Now, it's not because Egyptians are bad people. The opposite would be true. I have many Egyptian friends. Okay? So when it comes to the one-on-one thing, it's great. When it comes to, again, the silhouette or the, let's say, the wave, it's uncontrollable. Of course, it's a matter of education and acculturistic processes. It's not something that can be understood logically. Now, I can just try to explain to you why, it was given birth, where it comes from, to my opinion. Israel was created or given birth in 1948. It was almost nothing there. Many, many Arab states actually took it from the beginning. Israelis do not understand that. But this is something that should be said. Israel was taken from the outset as kind of a Western offshoot or proxy, Western proxy. So many Israelis would think that the problem is their Jewishness. I don't think so. I mean, in a way, yes, of course. We talk about that here. But the main problem of Israel is that is been taken as a Trojan horse, which was installed in the Middle East from the outset to preserve Western imperial interests. Now, I've been to NATO school in Rome. It was 5 years ago, and I had a wonderful experience. I was lecturing in front of Arab officers who came from many Arab states to get kind of an idea about the world, political science, whichever. And, I have to say, I was really welcomed by them. There was nothing actually. But when we tried to talk about the existential stuff, the juicy stuff, one of them actually politely said, he was a Jordanian, "Professor, don't underestimate us, and don't sell us the story that Israel was created in 1948 and that was in tandem with the British and the French leaving or pulling out from the region. Don't sell it as a mere coincidence, please, for the sake of our discussion, for the sake of our ongoing, friendship with each other." So this, in Arabic there is a word named mu'amara. I don't know if you are familiar with that. Mu'amara is conspiracy. So when you are used to think of reality as a bunch of conspiracies, you always have an ultimate answer to your problem. And by the way, the late Professor Eli Kaduri, who made a huge contribution, immense contribution to Middle Eastern studies, and he was a professor in LSE here, he said once something which is very, very good. Even paranoids have enemies. So in each conspiracy you can find kind of an ingredient of truth. I mean, I'm not saying that it is completely false. But when your brain is trained for, understand the conspiracy from the outset, you don't have the ability to really analyze things in kind of a more well-organized and well-thought way. So, first of all, Israel was taken from the beginning as kind of a Trojan horse. It's more of the same. The West was here, he is not there. We are left with the leftovers. How should we name the leftovers? Zionist entity. In Arabic, many Arabs didn't actually use the term Israel until recently. It was called in Arabic Al-Kiyan al-Sahayuni, which means the Zionist entity. Zionism, by the way, is both secular and Western. Al-Kiyan al-Sahayuni. It's the Zionist entity. So this is something that we have to just, now let me take it from the Israeli side. As a boy that grew up in tandem with Israel, Israel is older than me, 10 years. So you can just do the calculation. But I'm there all the way with Israel. My grandma, my grandpa, they didn't know Hebrew, nor English, neither English, just Arabic. Okay, so I grew up in Ramat Gan in Israel with a grandma that was admiring Gamal Abdel Nasser. He hated Israel, but he was a great orator. You see what I mean? So there was something which was very, very nice there, because I got something that I couldn't get from anywhere else. It is as if that I was living in kind of an Arab neighborhood in a way. But of course, growing up with Israel. And Israel was given birth as kind of entity that was wrapped up by an Arab belt which tried to suffocate it. And again, it's not my interpretation. Just go to the speeches given by Gamal Abdel Nasser in the 50s and the 60s. We are going to demolish Israel. Pushed it back to the sea. This is something which is unnatural, unacceptable. We have to try to gain our glory. And Gamal Abdel Nasser talked about Arabness, Ummah Arabiya. Once again, when you have a guy who is coming up with a far-fetched vision, he has to have kind of a scapegoat by which to feed the, great ambitions. Gamal Abdel Nasser was in this caliber, a leader that was great orator, full of pathos, and he offered the Arab fold a dream. But the dream of uniting the Arabs from the ocean, which is North Africa, Maghreb, to the Gulf, which is the Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf, as we said, all of them should be united. He said that this would be achieved only if we are united in our resistance to imperialism, if we know who are the Trojan horses among us, like King Hussein in Jordan, like others, and if we know that Israel or Al-Kiyan al-Sahayuni must be demolished, because this would be kind of an example of how an Ummah Arabiya, Arab nation works. So it became kind of a precondition for fulfilling the dream. If you would like to get the dream, you have to go through Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. And that was highly acceptable. 48, it didn't work. It's not only didn't work, against all odds, this tiny state became independent, became a reality. The Arabs in their dictionary got kind of an idiom named Nakba. Nakba is a catastrophe. In the aftermath of the Nakba, people like Nasser came to the fore saying, hey, don't worry. We are officers. We have military experience. We know how to deal with them. Everybody was waiting until 1967. But here comes another catastrophe. This was now the Naksa. which is a different catastrophe. Nakba and Naksa. The people who fell into the cracks from 48 to 67 were Palestinians, of course. Palestinians. They didn't recognize themselves as Palestinians until 1967. That is the paradox. They were Arabs because they were part and parcel of the Arab nation. What happened after 67 is that the Middle East got sort of a Palestinian problem, refugees everywhere. So many Arab states had the interest to get something to be compensated by that they are holding in their territory camps of refugees. One should ask himself, how come that after 70 years the camps are still there? I tell you why. There's no Arab state who would pay the price for that. For example, how about granting them citizenship? Not with your money. There are Arab states who would like to pay the money for that. Dismantle the refugee camps. Give them kind of a citizenship. Job opportunities. Now, I just told some of you in the break that in the Middle East you can talk a lot about the future, you can talk a lot about the present, but what is taking you captive, what you are being taken captive by is your past. Okay, past is very strong here. Oh, sorry.
I'm not being too personal, getting messages from
Oh,
above.
I think that is should be put here. Yeah, is it okay? Yeah. Great. The important thing is that after 67, many Arab states came to realize that if they are going to sacrifice themselves on this never-ending story, trying to settle this course with tiny states, but very, very strong when it comes to its military might, they're going to go nowhere. 67 and beyond is the transition from collectivism in the Arab world to individualism or particularism. كل واحد لحاله, which means everybody for itself. The notion actually was viewed in Egypt first when Anwar Sadat replaced Nasser. And Anwar Sadat said loud and clear that 48, 56, 67, 73. What is that? 4 wars. Or Egypt was entangled in, was where our future lies, he said. If we are going in every decade to smash ourselves on the iron or against the iron wall of Israel. Iron wall, by the way, is kind of an article which was written by a genius guy. Not very liked in Israel, maybe nowadays more. His name was Z.F. Jabotinsky. He was a guy that articulated 25 years before Israel was created what would happen in the Middle East. And he said that Israel is not going to become an integral part of the Middle East, culturally speaking, and you know why. Because Israel is not one of us. It is a Trojan horse being installed by the West. I told you that. If Israel would like actually to have a future in the Middle East, it must actually rely on what he called, and brilliant people can epitomize or can sum up their ideology in two words: iron wall. What is iron wall? Jabotinsky said, if your neighbor would come to the conclusion that it is futile to go for you once a decade and be defeated, he might come to the conclusion that it doesn't pay off, that he won't have any future for itself or himself. What happened there is that many Arab states begun thinking differently on their position in the Middle East. Sadat actually was to be murdered 4 years after his visit of the Knesset. He was taken as pharaoh by his assassin. His assassin Khalid al-Islambuli, a guy that was hailed and praised in Iran, in Tehran, after 1979. But he was tried and he was saying, listen, I didn't murder the president of Egypt. I murdered Pharaoh. What is Pharaoh? Pharaoh is a pre-Islamic hero. A guy who is a hero in the infidelic or heretic eyes, not in Islamic eyes. 40 years later on, you must ask yourself, how come that this peace treaty is still valid? And by the way, Israel is doing with Egypt many things. Some of them I can't tell. Many things together. It's not because Egyptians and Israelis love each other. It's because, or more of, my enemy's enemy can be my friend. Let's think together. Who are Egypt's enemies? First of all, Muslim brothers. You know that Muslim brothers have been outlawed by Sisi. You know that? Second, Hamas, because Hamas is the stepson of the Muslim brothers. Hamas sits in Gaza. So when Sisi actually hears even something about Islamic Brotherhood, it gives him the grip. Okay? He's getting crazy about that. Since these are the enemies of Israel too, there is kind of a functional alliance. Some lunatics, the remnant of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, also found refuge in the Sinai Peninsula. And these guys are pretty crazy. They organize themselves in kind of a group named Beit al-Maqdis, which means the temple. Alluding to Jerusalem, of course, but coming up with kind of a radical Islam. They are sabotaging and doing many problems in Egypt and in Sinai. And of course, this is another case where Egypt and Israel have the same interest. Fascinatingly, Egypt and Israel are, I won't say close friends, but this is unheard of. The cooperation, full cooperation in intelligence, security, agriculture, water industry, here and there some high tech and advanced technology, and I will leave the rest for your imagination. Really. The same goes, it's 40 years, by the way. Morsi, remember Morsi? He was the president, which was authorized. He was a guy from the Muslim Brotherhood. This guy didn't mention the name Israel even one time in his presidency. He alluded to the Zionist entity. He couldn't even say the name. But did he abolish the peace treaty? Nope. You know what happened in the end? He was named by the extremist Pharaoh. He was named by the extremist in the parliament, Pharaoh, because he didn't call the peace treaty off. As he said before, he's going to do. In 1990, another precedent actually took place in the Arab fold. A murderer named Saddam Hussein invaded a neighboring state named Kuwait, Arab state, murdered, robbed, raped women, and just took control over Kuwait in 5 days. Who rescued Kuwait? Any idea? US. Just a minute. Let's just repeat that because you have to have the complex in the Arab mind. I am calling upon the West, which is my erstwhile enemy, basically, to rescue myself from another enemy, which happens to be an Arab state. I was sitting then in Tel Aviv University. I was a master's student. Every morning I was reading the editorial articles of Kuwaiti paper, which is well known, Al-Siyasa. And on the 5th of August, 3 days after the invasion of Iraq into Kuwait, I got this title in an editorial in Al-Siyasa. In Arabic, it went like that. Man huwa al-adu? Who is the enemy? What's going on here? You have told us back and forth that the only enemy we have in this region is Israel. You didn't tell us that we can be violated. And violated not because we just been occupied. Our women, our sons and daughters, by other Arabs. So who is my enemy? This was the breakthrough. 2019, today, Israel is experiencing an unprecedented, functional alliance with the Arab world. Unprecedented. And again, I there are things that can be said. You understand that many of this should be under the radar because we have to just make many Israelis hold their horses. Israelis do not understand the Middle East, and they say, hey, if I have a functional alliance with you, why won't we have full normalization? Sounds logic. But if the leader is going to come up with full normalization, he is doomed by his own people. So you have to persuade Israelis not to go that far. Because if you would like to preserve that, you have to understand that beneath the radar is the only way to do that effectively.
It's like Oxford.
I like Oxford, yeah. It's great, yeah. So Arabs who were for Israel, the bad guys. And you know, when I was a child, I was told that non-Arabs are the good guys. Turks, Persians, Kurds, Ethiopians. It was even named by David Ben-Gurion the Peripheral Alliance. What does that mean? Yes, we are being suffocated by Arabs who are the bad guys. But look beyond that. You would find non-Arab players. Turkey, Iran, Ethiopia, Kurds. All of them are so nice to Israel. So it was as if to prove that Arabs are bad, you found that non-Arab players are so good. Look at the situation today, guys. It's the opposite. Non-Arab players, especially Turkey and Iran, are the nemesis of Israel and are the nemesis, mainly Iran, of most Arab states. So you don't have to be an expert to understand why the Saudis, who have nothing in common with Israel, believe nothing, but common enemy. And for the Saudis, there are no explanations to be given. They are pretty sure that the cunning and shrewd Iranians capitalized on Obama's naivete, created this thing that I showed you before. The Saudis and the Jordanians named it the Shiite crescent, in Arabic al-Hilal al-Shi'i, which means that you are building up a crescent by which to tear up the Middle East from Gulf to Mediterranean. And that's all. And the Saudis couldn't care less about Palestinians. They don't have time and energy to listen to these guys, miserable guys. In the 20th century, when the guy who asked loud and clear, what is the problem in the Middle East? Everybody knew. Palestinian problem. Solve it out. No problems in the Middle East anymore. In the 21st century, there is just one thing that makes you actually ask a question twice. Are we familiar with facts? 1 million Muslims have been murdered, tortured, found a death in 5 years. Mainly by other Muslims. The equation of the 20th century is not valid anymore because you have to have Israel in the equation. Well, some lunatics actually came up with the notion that Israel and the United States invented ISIS or Daesh in order to make Muslims kill each other. Well, conspiracy, you can do nothing about that. But where we can find that? Digital platforms. Fake news. So basically, when it comes to what we have here, and while looking at things that way, take into account that this is the bone tone now. Okay? You have Iran, you have Turkey, eager to have dominance in the Middle East. If you are eager to have dominance in the Middle East, you know what the recipe is. Scapegoat Israel. Okay? Capitalize on that. Doesn't work today. It worked in the 20th century. This is what they do not understand. This is what is missing now. So Israel was the pariah in the 20th century. You know who is the pariah today? Any idea? Iran. Iran. Look at the gathering in Manama, in Bahrain. 2 weeks ago. Iran is not there. Palestinians are not there. They are so furious about the United States. Where did they travel to? In the state of Bahrain? La La Land. You know what is La La Land? We would like to have it all. Right of return. Oslo. Oslo cannot be implemented anymore. I tell you why. Because 23 or 5 years have passed. That is why. Israel has changed. I can tell you. Israel is becoming much more right-wing comparing to what it was in the 90s. Things are changed. Palestinians were listening to good people with good intentions, by the way, who orchestrated Oslo in Europe and in Israel. They were so pretty sure that Oslo is the solution, and they were so anxious to implement it, and they were so fearful of becoming irrelevant if Oslo is not going to succeed or to be implemented, which happened actually. So the Palestinians were to be left with a watch or a clock which goes against the time, in opposite to what was promised to them by the experts. The experts in the EU, who I have to tell you, haven't got a clue about the Middle East. And I have been speaking in the EU 3 times in front of the wise people there. And I told them, and I guess that this was my last speech there, when I was telling that, how can you talk so much about the Middle East without understanding the basic facts? There was a nice lady that actually got the backlash. Her name was Catherine Ashton. I don't know if you heard this name. But she is kind of a peace seeker who always have solutions, or has solutions. Solutions to everything. We're going to move this to that, this to that. It was so pathetic, I have to tell you. So pathetic. But, you know, I can't be too angry about that because it's not fair. It's you know, when you have good intentions, you can get even Nobel Prize, like Obama. For what? For promoting the peace in the Middle East. You know, this is really, really something that must be written on the walls of history. A Nobel Prize for Peace. This guy actually has created, I'm not saying intentionally, not at all. But you know, in Hebrew, there is kind of an idiom, I don't know if you got it in English. The road to hell is fraught with good intentions. Do you have something like that? Yeah, good. So what I would like actually to say is that, you know, there was a kind of some Israeli let's say circles who said that it would high time to get back to the committee of the Nobel Prize and to say that, listen, this is too pathetic. Save this guy, because he's going to be recorded in the memory of human civilization as the guy who got the prize for promoting the peace in the Middle East. It would be kind of a laughing stock of history. If I would be Obama, I would do everything in order to just let have them bake, because, you know, in 50 years, 40 years, 1,000 years, who is going to explain that other than saying, as I said about Jimmy Carter? And Jimmy Carter was a very nice guy from Georgia. He was so impressed by the Shah and his wife, the Queen, that he added another, how would you say that, a concluding note before moving up in the lane. I have been to Tehran and Isfahan. I know now, and I am citizen number one in the world. If there is an island of stability, it would be Iran's Shah. Who's going to take it back? Nobody. Historians are going to slaughter him for that. Not the historians of now, historians of 500 years from now on. So, what happens is the shift or the change of the guard, as we said, the pendulum. Arabs became good in Israel's eyes. Non-Arabs, mainly Persians and Turks, became the problem. You know, more often than not, I ask many, many Jews all over the world, what is the grand exit, so to speak, exit? 21st century terminology. Jews came up with. I've been to Sao Paulo. I've been to some quarters in Europe. I'm just meeting young Jews who feel pretty, I would say, depressed by the fact that they are either attacked of their being Jews here and there, and they are being blamed for what Israel is doing. And you know what Israel is doing? You know, Israel is doing what Hitler did, you see that in the film, to Jews in the Second War. Well, Israel is not kind of a place where everything is nice and easy, definitely. And Palestinians are suffering. I can accept that. Why is the question. And I'm going to get back to those young people here and there. When I ask them, who is the greatest Jewish mind? Some of them came up with Albert Einstein. That's a legend. How can you ignore that? Others who, let's say, have something to do with humanities, I guess, or philosophy, picked up Baruch Spinoza, another great mind. Those who tend to tilt to psychiatry or something like that mentioned Sigmund Freud. Yeah, Jews actually have contributed an immense contribution to the human civilization. I think nobody can ignore that. But I think that the exit, when it comes to what Jews contributed to other Jews, must go back to people like Theodor Herzl, Max Nordau, people who were there in Basel in 1897 on the top of the Dreyfus affair.
What's the Dreyfus affair? I don't think everybody knows.
Dreyfus, I think that there are, I saw in it is going to be mentioned and dealt with, okay?
Just in one sentence, what is it? I don't think people.
Dreyfus affair is, it is kind of a story, a plot that was orchestrated against a Jewish French officer. This is something that came to nothing, but the whole thing made some Jews in Europe understand that it doesn't matter if you are going to hide your Jewishness. You can do that. That's okay. You know, if you are reading Goethe and Fichte and you are speaking fluent German, you could identify yourself as a German. But here is the problem. If in the place you live in there is a crisis whatsoever, economically speaking, sociopolitically speaking, and when people, locals, have to explain to themselves who the culprit behind the events, there must be kind of a scapegoat to be capitalized on. More often than not, I'm not saying just Jews, the others, of course, but Jews are always the others, especially when they didn't have a state of their own. It was very easy to go. Well, I know that you are going to deal with that. Anti-Semitism still there. Everybody knows that. Of course, this is a different a problem that must be dealt with and be actually provided with some explanations. Now we have something which is much more, scientific, BDS and other stuff. But there is something we must actually remind ourselves. How come that those two people, let us say intellectuals, Theodor Herzl and Max Nordau, could have seen in advance something that Jews in 2019 in the world in Israel haven't grasped yet. This is something that you don't understand. You know what was their exit on top of the Dreyfus affair? I'll put it that way. People without a state won't survive. Let me repeat that. It is so simple. People without a state won't survive. How simple, how true. These are my heroes. If I would like Israel to survive, I should make the next generations, especially my grandsons, because when I ask my grandson, he is 6 years old, where your great-grandfather was born, he said, everybody was born in Israel. So I know what Israel is because I have the experience of how things can be looked at when you don't have it. You know, we are human beings. We do value our healthy conditions, especially when we are sick or ill. So basically, if you have if you have a glimpse of idea how things can be looked at when you don't have it, you must appreciate that in kind of a very proportional way. This is the problem. Israel is a startup nation. People are with their feet in the Middle East, but their mind is elsewhere. There is kind of a gap between the head or the mind and the body. What we are trying to do for the sake of the Israeli society is to make next generations be well connected to this legacy. And I know, many in Israel to criticize me for saying that too boldly. But since I have grandsons and granddaughters, and since I am pretty old, and I'm not going to stick to PC stuff anymore, I say the truth. Here is the truth once again. Zionism is the most brilliant thing Jews have ever invented. You know why? Because Jews before the state were Jews of the diaspora. What Zionism made them be turned into is Jews with a better understanding. What does that mean to be a citizen of a Jewish state? Now, there are many problems in Israel. Don't get me wrong. I don't know if we'd have time for that. Many, many problems. I just told of you that I was my, I gave it in the world and in Israel 150 times. A lecture which was titled Villa in the Jungle. It is paraphrased over what the new candidate for prime ministership in Israel said once. His name is Ehud Barak. But I put it quote unquote just to ask myself actually what this spirit is. Now the jungle can be dealt with. The jungle. There are problems in the villa. This is another presentation to be given. Maybe somewhere else. But in Israel we have many problems. Somebody asked me about Haredis. Haredis. We asked actually Israelis, what are you? And we came up with something which was very shallowy. Secularist, religious nationalists. In Hebrew it's called Hardalim. And ultra-Orthodox, which is Haredis. 3 categories. On top of Muslim, Christian, Circassians, we have many of them in Israel. The problem is that many Jews decided to define themselves as not necessarily this or that. I am a secularist, but with a real adherence to tradition. So I am they confused actually. They were confused. Secularist, traditionalist, somebody even said secularist, religionist. Many, many things that told you that, Jews, they like to argue against each other. No, you have to say that.
I'm going to argue with you.
You have to say that, once in DC somebody told me, how come that you talk that much about rifts, about an 8 million people state? We are coming from a state of 250 million, and we don't talk that way. I said, in Israel you have 8 million prime ministers. Everybody knows better than everybody else what to do. How things should look like. Pros and cons. Jews have their, like everybody, pros and cons. So here's the thing. Haredis here, like Palestinians in Israel, that there are 20% of them Palestinians. You remember that when you are talking about two-state solution, I don't think that this is in the offing. But let's say, yes, two-state solution. So one state should be Palestinian. Yeah? How are you going to define the other? You.
How I would define the other state, it would be a Jewish state.
Not acceptable.
Okay.
By love, by peace lovers. What would be the alternative? There is a debate in Israel. I cannot be left without a state which is in tandem with my primordial identity with Jewishness. So you say Jewish state, but there are many in Israel who wouldn't like actually that equation.
And how is that dynamic changing with the growing Haredi community?
Yeah. Sorry?
I would imagine that dynamic.
Listen, I need Haredis, Tel Avivians, Jerusalemites, secularists. I don't want them to change their culture.
Right.
Because this would be very childish, very Western thinking.
Yeah.
Even the guys who came with Zionism, they came up with a melting pot idea. What is melting pot? Melt them. You're going to get, in the end of the way, kind of a Srulik monolith. It's infantile. We should respect culture. We should respect culture. But, only in one condition. You're going to get back to your village. You're going to get back to your neighborhood. You're going to get back to your home. Observe your culture, whatever. When it comes to the workplace and the day-to-day thing, you should contribute to Israelism. Okay? Without damaging your culture, which I respect. So here is what we are trying to do. I don't think that it is very easy to go. But you know what Catherine Ashton asked me, so what is the solution? I told her, I have a solution. If the good guys of the world, Putin, Trump, I don't know, are going to come together to the Middle East and implement a Marshall Plan, like the one that was implemented after the Second World War. Now, here's the thing. In tandem with the economic lever, we are going to come up with an educational revolution, which aims at just one thing, that every grown-up would know something about the others and not only about himself. Respecting the otherness of the other. That's the solution.
But how would that work on the level?
Where?
Well, for example, with laws, for example, the fact that if you're not Jewish, you can't get married in Israel. You have to, I mean, they acknowledge marriage from abroad.
But the state acknowledged marriage in Cyprus and other. You know, these are the Middle Eastern stuff.
Right.
You don't have to be very, very strict. You can't in the Middle East. It's, you know, look at that. It's Middle Eastern stuff. You have to come up with something in the middle of the road. Not everything should be written in the book. And you cannot deal with things by the book. You have many, many differences. The most important thing is a listening ear. A listening ear. I respect you. You are different than me, and you are different than me, and you are different than me. I'm not going to force you to become similar to me, and not vice versa. Now, after having respected our differences, let's sit together. Let's find a common denominator. That should be the spirit. To create kind of, I don't know, an altruistic world. Slogans. It's nothing. This is for the UN. If you would like actually to really deal with life, you have to go into the forest. You have to be familiar with the trees, with the colors. You can't have kind of a photo to be taken from above. Yes, we have a problem in Israel, but I'm going to tell you what I say. It's very simple. If we are not going actually to find a modus vivendi among us, all of us are going to lose. That's simple as that. Because in the end of the day, we do sit in the same boat. And the boat is not that big, believe me. I told you, 20 minutes from west to east. You know what was land in the Middle East in the 20th century? Two things. First of all, I have nobody to count on. Nobody. Bashar al-Assad slaughtered people in gas chambers. Gas chambers. Everybody knows that, including the guy who brought peace to the Middle East, Barack Obama, who promised that if and when, not him, John Kerry, even when we know that, he made use of chemical weaponry. He is doomed. But he said, so what? This did that. Laughing at everybody and makes the Americans, the Obama administration's actually kind of a mockery. Now, you shouldn't be surprised by that. That's the world. Very, very cynical, cruel. The second thing is If you snooze, you lose. Just simple as that. Look at the Kurds. 40 million people. Do they have a state? Nope. Will they? Nope. Why? They have history of 3,000 years. They have their own language. I tell you why. They have been fallen into the cracks. And they thought that somebody would create or organize for them their independence. Not at all. You know, there is Israel because of a guy named David Ben-Gurion, lunatic, that against all odds did something the Jews around him, now we know that, warned him not to do. Not to do that, David. By irony of history, the United States threatened Israel with an embargo if Israel is going to declare its independence. 7 Arab states were ready there with their sword, swearing to God that they are going to kill or slaughter Israel. Enlightened Jews surrounding Ben Gurion in Moetzet Ha'am in Tel Aviv. Now we know that because we have documents. They were so smart. They were Jews. Why should we seek more problems than we have? Please, David. Not now. Lucky us. David did the unexpected thing. Which means in the Middle East, always expect the unexpected. Otherwise, you are doomed. So this is something that you have to take into account. Palestinians didn't have David Ben-Gurion. They could have had a state after Oslo. Be pragmatic. Be wise. You know, take the money from the quartet. Europeans are just they're going to give you as much as you want. Take from Israel, actually, its expertise in the high-tech technology. Be smart. Provide job opportunities to your young people. Go on fighting for your state. But do things in kind of a pragmatic and responsive way. But you know what the problems with the Palestinians? Sorry to say that. They act in kind of a very childish manner. Either or if I'm going to start taking something from Israel, from Europe, why won't somebody come up with the notion that, by which to say, you know, we gave up on the right of return thing. You are being taken by your past. More?
So take some questions.
Yes, please, please.
Anybody have a question, a comment?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Professor Rabi, for your intriguing lecture and presentation. If you'll bear with me, I have a three-part question, but I will be brief in asking those. One, you mentioned the naivete of the previous administration in engaging the Middle East. And can you speak to, one, whether you believe the current administration, Friedman, Kushner, and Greenblatt, have exercised more due diligence in presenting and coming up with their Trump peace proposal? Two, you, okay, yeah, so you mentioned...
Let me respond on that. Okay, Obama just said it, President Barack Obama said it loud and clear, and Kerry, of course, echoed him. In order to show how smart the guy is, he said, listen, everybody of my predecessors thought that Iran is the problem. I'm going to let you where they were wrong. Obama. Iran is the solution. Okay? This is what this guy actually came up with. It was not his thing. There was a beehive behind him. Even before he became president, we know that nowadays, they talked to Javad Zarif, they talked to many, many Iranian statesmen before, and they orchestrated this whole thing that came to be seen in the nuclear agreement, 2015, And now you see, this is an agreement. Iran is violating the agreement. Is somebody doing something? Not at all. This agreement has nothing to do with Iranian violations. Has nothing to bring in. Trump, listen, I have to tell you one thing. I am not fully understand Trump. I don't know if you. I have to tell you that. But that is the problem. But that is the problem of the Iranians. Here is the thing. You know, the Iranians were conducting the manners in the Middle East. They dictated the rhythm. It was for them. John Kerry and Obama was a breakfast for them. They are very shrewd. Yeah. The best diplomats you have ever had. I also warn my Israeli fellow men, don't underestimate them. The whole West, with its almighty technologies, cannot challenge them around the table. This is why they would like you actually to get back there. They're going to just actually got what they want there. Trump, the problem with Trump, when the Iranians are viewing things is, hey, who is that guy? Somebody could tell us what this guy had between his ears. I mean, they ask themselves. Now, he says, oh, you just did a very dangerous thing. You're gonna pay the price. You know, for the Ayatollahs, this is taken seriously. Because they don't know whether this is something which is façon de parler or something that heralds a new thing here. So the simple fact that they don't understand the West as kind of a taken for granted or a naivete, Trump is coming up with kind of a businessman thing here. And you know, he's doing things that everybody is bewildered by. In Jerusalem, in Erwa, he takes the money from all those who got American money without a reward for the Americans. So he just, you know, it's like a company. What did you do with my money? Show me. And then he found that an agency that was given 120 million a year, half of it was channeled, I don't know if you know that, for salaries in Gaza for people who ran Gaza on behalf of the Hamas. Some of them were saboteurs. You know, he just said, listen, if that is the case, no money. Go to the Europeans. Excellent. Take money from them. Just like that. Now, if you are a Middle Easterner, you say, hey, what is that? The West is giving money without criticism. Where this guy is so rude to ask us, what did we do with his money? This is unprecedented. Just like that. So, you see, I mean, there is a difference. Yes, please.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I would hope that the current administration is doing its due diligence and understanding the root problems, the history, the cultural dynamics that are at the root of the issue. But that's really what I was getting. I was hoping.
You know, Bahrain is kind of an economic bomb of would-be, hopefully, kind of. It has nothing to do with the peace agreement in the Middle East. You know, people would like to do business, and Saudis, Emiratis, Bahrainis are trying to do things beneath the radar with Israel and others, and that's the thing.
But so you mentioned Iran, and to that point, I'm curious as to whether, and I mentioned this to you earlier, I'm curious as to whether you believe that this functional alliance model based upon the premise of my enemy's enemy being my friend, whether you think that's sustainable given that it's not unforeseeable that you could have a political regime
Nothing
shift where
is
the
sustainable.
Ayatollahs- Yeah.
No. Listen, you know, that's nothing is sustainable. It's a functional alliance. You have to be aware. And if you snooze, you lose. And you can hope that Ayatollahs can be ousted by, I just have to remind you, they are very cruel, very cruel. They don't have any other place to go. They know exactly what they're going to get if there is an Iranian Spring them there. And they have their own mercenaries. It is called Basij in Persian. They are just slaughtering people in the streets, when they are protesting against the regime. I can show you that. We know that. They are very cruel, like the Hamas in Gaza. What counts for them is their politics of survival, not the people. They took the money and channeled it to Yemen, Hezbollah, Syria. Why? Why won't you channel the money to your people? And their people know that. Now, if you ask me if they are able to have kind of a coup d'etat or kind of a revolution, it's very difficult. There is no opposition in Iran.
Shannon?
Yes, please.
Also, just a few quick points, mostly pertaining to some things we discussed and saw in the earlier session. Number one, you talked about you have some students at university who do nothing but sort of patrol the internet for language, anti-Semitic language, videos, what have you. I appreciated that because it belies an understanding that social media.
That's because
internet,
culture matters. Culture
that?
matters.
Correct.
Without
Correct.
culture,
I mean,
you
social
cannot
media
understand
and the
the
internet are being used as
Yeah.
weapons for anti-Semitism, so I appreciated that. I had a question that sprang from the video that you actually showed, Charles.
Yeah.
While I have my sort of generalistic nitpicks about the balance of the video, I think it was great that they did an expose showing all of this, highly inflammatory language in these mosques. There wasn't really a whole lot of balance in terms of some of the things being done by local groups, organizations, people, free thinkers who oppose that kind of thing, but that's nitpicking. My question that came from it was when we talked about the protections of free speech afforded to these people to be able to say these despicable things. And I thought about hate crime laws, right? I'm not a lawyer, but I thought about hate crime laws and how they are supposed to protect people who, religious groups, genders, whatever, from acts of violence, but it doesn't protect people from inciting acts of violence, right? And I've been talking to some of my colleagues about that. And I wondered what would happen if the Klan in the American South got together and held a public rally and said, we're going to talk about killing all the blacks or killing all the women or what have you. And the last thing, the thing that I really thought about, I did a little bit of coverage of the worst massacre of Jews in the U.S., the Tree of Life Synagogue, 11 people murdered, obviously. And the shooter very willingly said that he was motivated by the belief that all Jews needed to be killed. He was actually spewing this stuff on a social media network called Gab that called itself the place for free speech. So I'm just wondering how some of this, the protection of free speech under the First Amendment might need to be,
So I'm going to respond very quickly. Let me respond. The reason why I think Zvi Eshkeli's work on the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States, not Islam and not Muslims, is so vital is the absolute illiteracy that we have as a society of the threat that it poses. So this was indicative of Muslim Brotherhood ideology. So it's not a question, it's not looking at the Muslim community. It's a diverse community that is vastly law-abiding and decent, but there's a reactionary political movement in the United States now that needs to be understood. So it's not a question of balancing. If you're looking at the Ku Klux Klan, you're looking at the Ku Klux Klan. We're looking at a reactionary social movement that is out to exterminate Jews and to destroy democracy. There's actually a person here, I don't want to say who the person is, who was involved in helping to establish a mosque somewhere in the United States, and there was a coalition of Christians and Jews who helped to welcome the mosque into their community. And this person walked out of the room crying because they helped to establish the mosque, and he or she recognized the preacher saying these horrible things about killing Jews that they helped to welcome into their community. So we need to become literate and make the distinction between political Islam and decent Muslim Americans who are living peacefully according to the law. And I think we need to become literate on that. I think it's essential that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
kind of wake up.
And I would just one thing. You know, we are living in a world of fake news, okay? What we have to be is keenly aware. How dangerous is that? I mean, you know, we have 2 billion Muslims. Most of them are great. Just thinking of themselves as human beings like you and me. What we would like to have every day. Just a peace of mind. Let me go to the work and get back.
And do we put the First Amendment on an international level? Is this First Amendment for American citizens? Or do we impose it on the world in places where there's no freedom of expression?
Imagine. Just think of that. The Middle East is exporting the negative ingredients that we had known there for centuries, first of all to Europe, and you know what the situation in Europe now, and I dare say even to the United States. Now again, if you are not aware of that, it could be epidemic. You see what I mean? Many people who are innocent, are going to inspired by that, not because they believe in that, but because they have problems, I don't know, with their girlfriend, with their salary, with their society, with their future, with, you know, it's not something that could be scientific. But because we are dealing with the digital platforms, we are dealing with kind of an epidemic stuff. And just, I don't want us actually to become, you know, categorized people. That's not the thing. We have to respect the otherness of the other. But at the same time, we have to come up with something by which to trace and to carefully follow those trends, because at a certain stage it could become kind of a tsunami. And that is the problem. That is the problem with 21st century. Because you have now something, a device that can drive this whole thing in no time to everywhere. And when you are trying to ask yourself what happened, yes, could be too late.
Yeah, speaking of being too late, you have 4 minutes and many questions. So Bertha, and then
Yes, please.
so maybe can we collect a few questions very succinctly? Is it okay? Because we only have 4 minutes. If you can ask a quick question, and I'll collect a few.
So my question is related to the first part of the lecture. You mentioned how Abu Muslim wants more of a secular Palestinian state, if and when possible.
Who?
Abu Muslim.
Abu Mazen?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
And Hamas is more leaning more towards the Islamic identity of the Palestinians.
Yeah.
Where does the Palestinian Christian community fit into this question?
Following.
Good question.
Okay.
Next question.
So thank you for your presentations today. I really
Thank you.
enjoyed your visuals, especially the maps.
Thank you.
But you ended kind of saying.
I really did, just try to use them now, but I was not able because the.
Yeah, right.
You know.
But, so, you know, you touched on how education is pretty much going to drive us into a space of everybody understanding the otherness and so on, and I really appreciate that. However,
Hopefully, yeah.
what would you say is the now solution? So I think education is something you implement, and over time you will see its effects, but what about like the next 20, 30 years before that?
In the Middle East or beyond?
I guess in the Middle East, and then.
Okay.
And one more, Nathan, and then.
Mine's kind of the same vein as this. So I really appreciate when you talk about like cultural understanding being critical to actually dealing with these issues. But in the same vein, I had an issue with you referring to Palestinians as childish, just in the sense. I had an issue with you referring to Palestinians overall as childish, just in the sense that like there is a large sect, especially in Fatah, not Hamas, but that is like actively trying to establish a more secular state that would be, you know, peaceful tandem with Israel. And I think that, you know, in the same vein of cultural understanding, like you put yourself in, you know, the shoes of Palestinians, like it's not ridiculous to have a more kind of visceral reaction Not that I personally agree with that visceral reaction, but
You have a point.
yeah, that's my comment.
Okay.
And Iran, one very quick.
Just to make a point to my colleague, non-Jews can get married legally in Israel. There's no problem with that. I don't know where you got this information. This is the fake news.
I can accurate that. So Jews, if you're not married non-Jews, but if you're a non-Jew and you're marrying a non-Jew, there is no problem getting married in Israel.
You can get married also with
He talked about if you are married to them.
Yeah, if you're a Jew and you want, because the marriage institution is religious, it's orthodoxy, and Jewish orthodoxy, they don't allow you to marry Jews and non-Jews.
Okay, let's get focused. And Richard, last question, you'll respond as well.
Just to point on this issue of the hate speech, it's not a question of repressing the hate speech, it's a question of making people aware that it exists and opposing it. And that's what's not happening. We've got hate speech that proliferates and nobody wants to talk about it. That's all.
Okay, so let's start.
30 seconds.
Well, let's start with the Palestinians. I mean, it's well connected. What was your question? I remember.
But the Christians.
Christians are being fallen into the cracks. So let's just say it loud and clear. Where is the safest place in the Middle East for Christians? Okay. Got it? You understand that? That is something that is a fact, okay? Christians were fallen into the cracks. When Moshe was there, Copts, who are Christians, were fleeing from Egypt. Most of them are back with Sisi promising them everything, not all of them. Okay? I don't want to go to Syria and Iraq. They are not there actually to say something because they were slaughtered. Now, in Israel, I invite you to Israel because there is a city named Nazareth. There are many, many Christians there. And here is the good news. Many of them, and some Muslims too, Palestinians, are being brought into the state machinery. The state machinery. Many of them are being brought into many, many other places that weren't there before. And when it comes to Christians, there is a new trend. Kind of a proportion of them, young people, would really like to be mobilized or enlist to the army. Okay? So this is a fact, really. I mean, you should just examine it. I know it's very, very difficult to say something good about Israel. But just ask Christians who live in Israel, they would tell you that. Now, you know, if this is a Middle East that knows everything about himself and not about the other, and Muslim brotherhoods are coming to the fore, if I would be a non-Muslim guy, I would take my feet and just get out of there immediately. There are people who are actually lacked experience, thinking that, you know, in Hebrew, it's a very Jewish thing to say, "Hiye beseder." Let it go. I mean, it's just a passing phenomenon. Not at all. Not at all. You have moderate Muslims, if they are going to run the show, they know how to deal with Christians. But if those guys are coming to the fore, Muslim brothers, that's the end of the story. Now, about the Palestinians, you know, I don't want to try to offend anybody. You know, I have some of my friends actually, and some Israelis and Jews who are infantile. Infantile is not a curse. It's just the difference between a grown-up and a child, that's all. The problem is that you have some grown-ups and adults who are behaving like children, that's all. Now, what I'm trying to say is that if the Palestinians had had the ability to swallow it up, it was bitter. But take from the Europeans the money. Take from Israel its wisdom, technologically speaking. Take from the Arabs what they're going to do, tell you. Take from the United States and skip fighting for your own state. Everywhere. You know what? It's an alternative history. It won't happen anymore because it didn't happen when it should happen in 95. And this is why I said, if you snooze, you lose. History doesn't ring a bell twice. It doesn't mean that somebody would give you back Oslo, because it is done. There is no possibility on the ground now to implement Oslo. So the problem is that you have many people who behind their ears, there is a box that was installed in the 20th century, and they still marching in the 21st century. So they are being asked about problems. They are shooting, kind of straightforward solutions, but those solutions are related to something that is not valid anymore. So this is my take. And again, I warn my co-Israelis, my fellow Israelis, if you are going not to learn a lesson from what happened to the Kurds and the Palestinians, we are all doomed. If you are going to tell me, let's count on this and that, let's get things actually be arranged one way or the other, this is unhealthy in the Middle East, and you're going to pay the price for that. Now, I have to tell you that what I said here is very, very problematic for many Israelis, because Jews actually are people with good intentions. I am an Arab. That's the problem. So I know actually how to think, Many Jews are coming from, European background. They know about the world. They read Jean-Jacques Rousseau. They know actually what John Locke said. They know. I tell you why. They know what should be. I mean, in my book, there is kind of a citation being taken from the speech of Obama. May 2011. White House. The president in there. You know what happened that day? Osama bin Laden, the arcade terrorist, was captured and just killed. I invite you to go to just re-listen to that speech. We are in kind of a true transition to a different world. We have just slaughtered the head of the snake, Osama bin Laden. On top of that, don't forget, people in the Middle East are being gathered in the squares. Haven't I told you 2 years ago when I was in Cairo? Remember that Cairo speech? That things are going to happen differently. He didn't say because the fact that I am the president, but this was the, implicitly there. Day after, a lady called Rania Abu Zaid, writing in the New York Times, she said something that is being gleaned from the Tempest of Shakespeare, for the Shakespeareans of you. How beauteous the Middle East is. No radical Islam. Democracy is everywhere. Haven't I told you that? And here comes the punchline, which is being written word by word in my book. Now, Barack Obama said, it is high time for us to start thinking of that part of the world, the Middle East. That's for you. As it should be, rather than as it is. If in the Middle East somebody start thinking that way, he's doomed. Most of the problems are being driven from the fact that people are so well entrenched in their wishful thinking that they interpret the present only in line with what they think they're going to have in the future. So you are becoming a selective reader. A selective reader. You can't afford that in the Middle East. 25, 30 years, we shall hope for the good and prepare for the worst. See, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I guess that it would be much better if I would tell you, you know what? We are going to come up with some UN committees. They have a good solution to everything. You know, I mean, people would buy that and would be very happy to have that. But sorry, Charles, I can't deliver that. What I would like you to know, I mean, we have a good hope for, you know, people coming by themselves, using digital platforms, maybe change them. I mean, that could happen, hopefully. But I cannot, simply cannot, let my people be driven by a wishful thinking. Because in the Middle East, once you are not there, it's gone. You're going to pay the price. Sorry for putting that way. But you know, there is something you should know about Jews. Most of them are suffering from the Holocaust syndrome. Holocaust syndrome. You know, I've been to the state in the 12, 13, 14, you know, and when Ahmadinejad was the president, I am 87.5% Iraqi, which is an Arab, and 12.5% Farsi, which is a problem. But, you know, Ahmadinejad said, a president of a state coming in the morning, here is what he said in Farsi. Israel boyad mahv shavad. Which means that, where are you from, sorry?
I'm Dutch. From Amsterdam.
Dutch. It is as if I would come in the morning and say, Netherlands should be demolished in no time. Every day. Now, many Americans said, and they were right, don't take him seriously. I didn't take him seriously, by the way. The problem is that when you have something like the Holocaust syndrome here, you cannot take it or let it go unnoticed. Now, there could be politicians who are going to capitalize on that, that's for sure. But it doesn't change the simple fact that it hits you in kind of a place that makes you think in a different way about yourself. You are pretty anxious about your generation, next generations. I want you to get that, because this is not something that I can logically explain to you. Yeah, sorry guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.